And Iowa State, don't know much about them, don't like the Big 12. I think they're a weak football team.
Well, do you have any statistics for us, Andrew, or non-emotional reasons why you picked Iowa State?
Honestly, most of my reasons are pretty emotional based too, except I'm the anti-homer out of these guys on your crew. I watch the Big Ten teams every week, and I have not been impressed in the big games by these Big Ten teams. Iowa State, a team that probably does, according to a lot of people, does not deserve to be in a bowl game either. But Coach Paul Rhodes down there is just an excellent motivator, and I expect him to get his team fired up and play on this fact that a lot of people think that they don't deserve to be in a bowl game, and really have them hungry and come out there and beat this Minnesota team.
All right, and finally we have the Chick-fil-A Bowl, Andrew, Tennessee, Virginia Tech. In other years, it'd be a great matchup. This year, it's still a pretty good one. Tell us a little bit about this game and why you decided to go with the Volunteers.
Well, just looking at it on the surface, this seems like a very heavy mismatch in favor of Virginia Tech, a ranked team ranked 12th against an unranked Tennessee team. Virginia Tech has a very strong rush offense, a great freshman running back in Ryan Williams, and Tennessee with only the seventh best rushing defense in the SEC, which is not very good. But if you really kind of break it down and look at this and the way that the teams line up, the Tennessee rushing stats are very kind of skewed based on some spread teams that they played and really struggled with, teams like Ole Miss and Florida that just ran wild over this team. But if you look at the way Tennessee has played defense against teams that run more of a pro-style offense with a serviceable quarterback and a great running back, I'm namely talking about here Alabama, like you can see, holding Mark Ingram to one of his worst games on the season, less than 100 yards, no touchdowns, one of only 3 teams to do that. In fact, the whole Alabama team having no touchdowns, only 4 field goals. I like the way that this Tennessee defense actually looks matched up against this Virginia Tech team, and I expect them to hold off Virginia Tech long enough that Jonathan Crumpton can come in and win the game for them.
All right, well, Andrew broke it down pretty well right there. Of course, I disagree with Andrew picking Virginia Tech. So do you, Scott. In 10 seconds, why the Hokies over the Volunteers?
I say why the Hokies over the Volunteers because they have 3 losses, a very close loss to Alabama, relatively close loss to Georgia Tech, and a last-second loss to UNC immediately following that loss. They're the highest non-BCS team, the highest-ranked team that's not in a BCS bowl, so I think they're just better.
Plus, Lane Kiffin is a jerk.
Had to get that in there, didn't you?
I definitely did. All right, well, we're going to welcome on Peter Saul, my co-producer of Overtime, which will also be a depressing show. Another reason to watch WOLV. In just a second, let's take a look at Peter's section of bowls, the most prestigious non-BCS bowls now staring you in the face. We have Outback, Gator, Capital One, and Cotton. The Outback Bowl, hate to see what happens in the Big Ten in that one. West Virginia, Florida State, of course, Florida State throwing the bone there because Bobby Bowden is going to retire at the end of this year. Also have the Capital One, Penn State, LSU, which should be a great one, and Oklahoma State, Ole Miss. Decided to show the mascots for the teams in the Capital One Bowl there, and there's Penn State's mascot. They're the Joe Paternos. Oh, wait. No, he's still their coach. Wait, no, I think he's just their mascot. Anyway, we'll have to clear that up later. We welcome on Peter Saul now. Let's start with the Outback Bowl. Peter, you have a luxury of only covering 4 bowls, so you better be on your game. We all agreed that the Auburn Tigers are no longer the Auburn Tigers of old and can score a whole lot of points against this Northwestern defense.
That is indeed correct, Mr. Prasad. You remember last year when Auburn beat Mississippi State 3-2. That was a thrilling soccer match. But no, this Auburn team is brand new. They score over 30 points a game. Chris Todd, their quarterback, went from 5 touchdowns last year to 21 this year. Their running back, Ben Tate, went from 3 touchdowns last year to 8 touchdowns this year. And both those guys doubled their yardage this year. This is a brand new Auburn Tigers team that can really win some games. Remember, they took the #1 Alabama Crimson Tide down to the very last seconds of their match. Now you look at the Northwestern Wildcats, who haven't won a bowl game since the 1949 Rose Bowl. When they beat Cal, you know why they were in the 1949 Rose Bowl? Because the Big 9 Conference did not allow Michigan to go to Rose Bowl in back-to-back years back then. And Michigan, by the way, won the national championship that year. Weren't those good times? So despite some key wins over Iowa and Wisconsin for Northwestern Wildcats, I think the Auburn Tigers are the better team. I'm going War Eagle on this one. Not Roll Tide.
All right, well, we all had Auburn over Northwestern. We all have West Virginia over Florida State as well. I refuse to give any time to Florida State in this game because that's crap. that they got this game simply because Bobby Bowden is retiring.
6-6 teams should not be playing on January 1st.
That's right. Well, neither should all those other crap bowls, but this is actually a pretty prestigious bowl, the Gator Bowl. So let's move on to the Capital One Bowl. We're split here. David, you're the only one that goes with LSU. I picked Penn State because of their veteran backfield. Why did you go with the Tigers?
Because Penn State's veteran lineup has shown they just have the huge tendency of blowing critical games. I mean, they lost to Ohio State. They've done this many years. I mean, they've lost in the Big House before. They just don't seem to pick up games that they should, and big games that mean something. And I think LSU, with Les Miles as their coach, I just think they're going to be the more disciplined team, and they're going to win.
I don't know. Les Miles' decision-making late in game, close games, seems to be in question, especially after LSU's loss to Ole Miss.
Yeah, LSU has not been the team that some people were expecting them to be, and Jared Jefferson is fantastic.
Nick Sheridan, death. Sorry.
Jared Jefferson is a fantastic quarterback playing for LSU, but Penn State's just better. I think the criticism that they've never stepped up is a little unfair. This is the same team that only lost 2 games last year. Darryl Clark has showed tremendous poise in a lot of situations. Penn State's only losses, they did lose those big games to Ohio State and Iowa, but those are 2 BCS schools. You can't fault them too much for that. I think Penn State's a much better team.
All right, and Peter, finally the Cotton Bowl, which is usually a snoozer, but this year could be okay. 2 teams I would never pick to win unless they were playing each other. Oklahoma State and Ole Miss. You picked Ole Miss. I was the only one that went with the Cowboys of Okie State. Why high on the Ole Miss Running Rebels, Peter?
Well, we did have 2 teams here that were ranked in the top 10 at one point in the season. Mississippi as high as number 4, in fact, which was absolutely a disaster on the part of the pollsters. If you look at Ole Miss, they have a really good defense and a quarterback who is supposed to challenge Tim Tebow as the best quarterback in the SEC this year, and Javon Sneed, but he did not do too well. He threw 17 picks this season, if you can believe that. And then you look at Okie State, who was this standard Big 12 South passing amazing offense. Zach Robinson was supposed to lead them to 8,000 points a game. Instead, he's threw 10 less touchdowns than he did last year, and they laid an egg against their rival Oklahoma. It's going to be an interesting game, but I do see Ole Miss winning their return to the Cotton Bowl. Remember, last year they beat Texas Tech in a game of similar teams.
All right, Peter, well, thanks for your insight, especially your window into the South, as you are from Georgia. We have to take a commercial break, our last one of this episode, and then the granddaddy of them all, the Rose Bowl, will be discussed right after this break. Welcome back to Varsity Blue, the 2009-2010 Bowl Special. Alex Prasad, David Niles, Scott Wagner, BCS Bowls coming at you right now. Let's start with the earliest one chronologically. That'd be the January 1st tilt on ABC at 5 p.m. Ohio State and Oregon. Very interesting picks in this game. Both Scott and myself go with Oregon State, who is not playing in this game because they lost to Oregon. Both go with Ohio State, rather, picking our arch enemies. And of course, David, you go with Oregon. Oregon is definitely the favorite in this game. Why did you go unspectacularly with the favorite, David?
You mentioned the Pac-10 and bad defenses, but those bad defenses have to go up against good offenses. And what you see with Ohio State is a team that couldn't even put up points on the Michigan defense. And I just don't think they're going to be able to put up the points to keep up with the 1-2 punch of LaMichael James and LeGarrette Blount, being that he's not allowed to play for some odd reason. I just think Oregon's offense is too much.
Of course, LeGarrette Blount, the guy that punched the Boise State player, who deserved to be punched, by the way. No, I'm not actually saying that, but he was taunting him anyhow in Blount's defense. But you went with Ohio State. I know we were in Columbus this past weekend. Were you just wooed by Ohio State fans surrounding you into thinking this?
No, that's not quite it. This is going to be a very interesting Rose Bowl matchup, one of the most interesting Rose Bowls in the past few years anyways. The Oregon offense, potent offense against the Ohio State defense. Also on a sidebar, I'm very interested to see what type of uniforms Oregon wears. That will be almost exciting as the game itself. But Ohio State has really stepped up in the second half of the year, beating Penn State, beating Iowa, beating arch rival Michigan. Oregon's also stepped up. They beat USC, they beat Arizona, they beat Oregon State, all which decided the Pac-10 title. I really see Ohio State stepping up, winning this game because of their defense. Oregon's going to move the ball a little